Hey, everybody. Hello and welcome to Courageously You with Martha. My name is Martha Davis Alexander. I am your host on this show. We are on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, the #1 internet talk show network on the internet. You can reach me if you're interested in that early at marthadalexander@gmail.com. Write that down, marthadalexander@gmail.com, or at courageouslyoucoaching.com, or you can reach me at 805-422-6865. Guys, I am so excited for today. This is like one of my top topics of my thought, because I used to be an estate planning attorney. And this is something that I think is so important, that I so want to share this with you. It is so important. Protecting your legacy and your loved ones. It's estate planning, and we have Mika Domingo, and she has her own law group. She's a friend of mine. I always massacre her name, so don't worry about me. And Mika is the founder and managing attorney of her law group. Her firm is dedicated to providing outstanding service, personalized legal advice, and practical solutions to help you guys protect your legacy and loved ones. She is licensed in the state of California. Are you licensed anywhere else, Mika?
Just California for
Just
now, yes.
California. She's seen firsthand the financial and emotional damages that occurs to families when end-of-life decisions aren't clear, when estate disputes occur, and when the estate is thrown into probate. It is a mess. It is a mess, you guys. In addition to estate planning, Mika also represents trustees, beneficiaries, and third parties in probate and trust administration and litigation. So here's something that I know personally. This isn't her bio, but I know this about Mika. She's got a completely total client-centered approach. She places herself in your shoes. She truly cares. She is a heart-centered attorney, for sure, or she wouldn't be on my show. She empathizes with her clients, and she helps them overcome all their barriers and contribute to a greater success in the litigation process, as well as in establishing your trust, right? Because that's really what we're talking about today, is planning. So without further ado, welcome, Mika.
Thank you so much, Martha. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your podcast. You're amazing. It's an honor for me to be here, to be your colleague and your friend, and I'm happy to be in this space for your viewers and your listeners.
Yay, thank you. So one of the things that I really wanted to kind of have you talk about is the timing of an estate plan, right? And that stuff. Most of our viewers are on the Going Solo network, so they're either getting divorced, or some might be married, right, and still listening, but singles, right? So how important is it for them to pay any attention to an estate plan?
It's very important for anybody who is an adult to have an estate plan. And you had mentioned, as far as our viewers, that we have solos and maybe recently divorced, even more important to have an estate plan in that case. If you think about it, once you become a legal adult, it is you can then enter into contracts. You can open an account, you can purchase assets in your own name. So once you're an adult, you should be looking into an estate plan. If you are going through divorce, and you'll know that upon the order on the dissolution, right, everything changes. You'll get the division of assets, and so you'll have things that belong to you, right? And you'll want to make sure that you're protecting not just things that you own, but you're thinking about yourself and if you have children and loved ones, of course, you want to think ahead. You want to think about what would happen. What would happen if you died without a will, for example? Will would be one of the four instruments that we'll talk about today. The management of your assets would have to be done under the intestate provisions of the probate statute. And what that means is in a manner that closely represents how the average person would have designed his, her, or their estate plan had that person didn't have if that person didn't have a will. Sorry.
Right. So
However,
it goes to the default, right? The whatever the
exactly.
state's legislature, whatever their default is, it's what it is. And in most cases, wouldn't the beneficiaries be the kids first, right?
Yes.
Then
Yeah.
who manage that? Who manages their kids' estate if you don't provide for that?
Right. So if you don't have, if you died intestate without a will, you didn't have a trust, then there still needs to be somebody who's authorized to manage your estate,
Yeah.
right? And so that is why you probably, most of your listeners probably have heard of probate, right? It's the court administered administration of an estate, and it's very public and very expensive. One would have to petition in court to be appointed to manage what you left behind. If you didn't have anything in place in terms of your will or your trust, so somebody has to, because if who's going to talk to the Social Security, all these financial institutions, right? So there needs to be something in place. And usually, you mentioned children, right? Usually, when a parent dies, then the children would then have to petition so that they have authority to
what
manage.
If they're minors, Mika? What if you still have minor children? Would your ex-husband then have management of your estate on behalf of your kids?
That would be so terrible, right?
But isn't that what would happen? Isn't that the scenario?
Right. It's definitely a problem when you die and you have minor children and you didn't have a will that provided for guardians. That's another advantage of having a will. You can designate guardians to take care of your minor children when you die, so that your ex-spouse doesn't have to take. Of course, your ex-spouse would have some responsibility in helping take care of the children, but the guardians would be those individuals that you trust, that you want to give that authority to.
Right. So here's what we want to say at this point. Y'all know that I'm a recovering attorney, and I just want to say that nothing that we're saying is creating a contract of legal representation. We are not giving you legal advice. We are merely, both Mika and I are merely giving hypotheticals. We are not, there's so much complexity in the law and in the different states. I just want to make sure that I say that no, we're not giving anybody legal advice. We're just telling you how important this is and what could or might happen if you don't do it. That's all we're doing. I just wanted to clarify that. All of a sudden I got, I need to do that.
Definitely not providing any legal advice. Martha and I are having a conversation to highlight what we believe is important to share, and in terms of protecting your legacy and your loved ones by looking into an estate plan.
So what if I just got divorced and I have I didn't get divorced, just so y'all know, Greg, we're good. Hypothetically, someone gets a divorce and they have like 18, 20, 21-year-olds, right? So they're old enough to manage their own assets, maybe, maybe not, depending, right? But what do they need? What do my adult children need in terms of, they don't own very much, but what might they need in terms of documents?
Yeah. So your children are adults. Let's just say you mentioned they're 18, 20. And so they can enter into a contract, right, with an attorney to have the attorney prepare some basic instruments. So one would be the will. So we've heard of the last will and testament, and some
Mhm.
people think that you have to have a lot of money to create a will. No, you don't, because the purpose of the will is not just to provide instructions on what to do with your assets. The will, which is effective upon death, provides guidance and appoints somebody, the executor, your agent, to have that authority to manage what you have. And managing also involves managing your funeral arrangements, for example. Giving instructions to your executor as to whether or not you're going to allow for any donation of organs. So an adult certainly can benefit from a will, even let's say, if your children have a bank account, very likely at that age, they'll have a bank account, right? Because if let's say an 18 or 20-year-old dies and that account was not in a will, it was under that person's name. Well, depending on how much is in that account, then we would likely have to look into probate. And right now, the threshold is, I believe, is 166,000 or so. Let me just what that means is if you die today and you own property in your name alone, that is, it's not in a will or trust, that asset exceeds 166,000, you would have to go into probate. So maybe your 18 or 20-year-old, they don't have that, that kind of money right now, but certainly they would still need a will to provide some
Or
instruction.
who's going to handle their stuff? Who's going to handle? I have one son who has music on out in the internet, right? That he has Amazon and Roku and all of that, right? And so certainly someone would have to continue to manage that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's interesting because I really never thought, even though I did estate planning, I never really thought that a will would be important for them. I always just thought about the healthcare power of attorney and the powers of attorney in the event that something happened to them and they needed someone to make a choice.
Yes. Well, you mentioned digital assets, right? Uh, these days, we see a lot of different assets in varying forms. So it's, used to be people will think I need a trust because I have a house. I have to place that house in a trust. But for younger people, they have intellectual property interests, for example, right? There's value in those assets, and this is why you have to be able to protect those assets in the event of death. And you also mentioned the other two instruments that are also very important for our young people and for everybody. Anybody who's an adult can have these two other documents created, and that is the durable power of attorney and the advanced health care directive. So absolutely, the durable power of attorney is very important because it allows you to authorize an agent to manage your financial affairs if you become unable or unwilling to manage your financial affairs yourself. And it can be as simple as you're traveling, right,
Right.
Martha? If you're traveling,
Or you get a disease or something and you're just unconscious for a period of time. You're in a car accident. You don't have to be gone for long, right? It's a friend of a friend had a 20-year-old who slipped on something on the floor, hit her head, and was in a coma for 3 days.
oh
So
boy,
just for that period of time, right? You want something in place for someone to make those choices for you and to be able to take care of your business, whatever it is.
absolutely. It's very, very useful and it's practical. And also the other document, the advanced healthcare directive, right? You mentioned accidents. Accidents happen, right? What do you do if what can your parent do, right? If you're a young adult, so you
Very little,
don't
I'm finding out. Very
Because
little.
you're 18 and you're 19 and something
Right.
happens to you, you then unfortunately you're at the hospital and the doctor says, is there a directive? Is there, what treatment is this adult going to allow the doctor to have? Your
Mhm.
medical decisions have to be clearly laid out in your advanced healthcare directive. So again, with the advanced healthcare directive, you're allowing somebody, your agent, you're giving this person authority to explain to the doctor what your medical decisions are.
But only if you can't,
If you
right?
can't,
Only if you can't explain.
exactly. And it's very useful because it then asserts your choice, right? Your choice into what treatments or procedures will be used in an emergency situation because you can't at that time. So that's why you need the advanced healthcare directive. So yeah, those three documents are important: advanced healthcare directive and your will and your durable power of attorney, even for our younger listeners. A trust would be another tool. Obviously, it's a very powerful estate planning tool that we can explore at the most basic level. It's a written document that determines how your assets will be handled after you die. Although as far as validity, it becomes the revocable trust. It's valid when you execute. You can make changes to this document anytime as long as you're alive. And it's a very customized document. Your wishes, in the same way as your wishes should be memorialized in writing on your will, your trust is a lot more flexible. It's a very powerful estate planning tool because you can provide very clear instructions on what to do with what you've worked so hard for: your real estate, your valuable possessions, your bank accounts. Those assets will be handled according to exactly how you want them handled. And it's not going to be up to some stranger, right? If
Right.
your estate were to go into probate.
Yeah, the stranger being the judge who makes a decision based upon family members or whoever petitioned whining at the court.
Yeah, who would want that,
Such a
right?
mess, man. Such a mess. Such a mess. So it's a perfect way to separate a family is to not leave an estate plan, right?
Exactly. And so, yeah, because we were talking about, what are the advantages, right? We want you to have something in place because you care about your family, your children, and you want to make sure they don't they're already, when it happens, when death happens, obviously there's time to grieve, right? Sometimes people don't even have time to grieve anymore because they are bombarded with questions, maybe from realtors. If there's a house that was left behind that didn't make it into a trust, for example, it's very stressful as it is. And when you don't leave behind instructions via your trust, your will, it's even more difficult for your family members because they should be
Yeah.
grieving, but they can't.
Yeah.
It's,
And if you're recently single, right, or if you're single, you really, really, really want to do at least part of the estate plan, right? Go in and
yeah,
see, but you certainly want someone to be able to make healthcare decisions for you. And you don't want to leave that up to an 18-year-old kid, just so you know, that's too much pressure for a kid, in my opinion. I mean, my daughter
yeah,
would probably do it. I don't know if she'd pull the plug or not. But anyway, let's get off of my funnies. Um, yeah. So it's funny. I used to liken estate planning to like fairy tales, right? Would Cinderella's dad have if he had left instructions, how would her life have been different? Or Harry Potter. It's my favorite example, right? Because most the parents would have chosen where he went, right? The magic family, no stability, no nothing. That is not who the judge would have picked. The judge would have picked the aunt and uncle, and he'd be under the staircase.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Well, who do you want, right? It's really important. And know that if you're recently single, that doesn't mean that you get to set who the guardians is above and beyond your ex-spouse. Just saying. Ex-spouse is gonna take custody if you are dead.
Yes, if you're single, of course, you want to make sure you're in control. If you've just had, you survived through the challenges of a divorce, right? You don't want to have any more issues in terms of what to do, with what you have, because you've just gone through that.
Yeah.
It's been difficult, and so you want to think ahead. It's not fun, right? It's not fun to think about the end of life. But especially if you're single and you've gone through something, you've survived, and you have a sense of relief, you might just invest the time and money into an estate plan sooner than later while everything is so fresh in your mind.
Yes. And you have everything and current stuff all put together. It's the perfect time. You know what? I hate to do this to you guys and Mika, but we have to go to a commercial break. Actually, we get to go to a commercial break. And keep in mind, I enjoy the commercial break because I love the music and I love the jewelry. So we're going to cut out for a minute. We are talking with Mika Domingo. I am so sorry. She is located, we're talking about protecting your legacy and your loved ones, and she is located in Walnut Creek, California. You can reach her at 925-891-5006 or at Mika, M-I-K-A, at MSDOMINGO-LAWGROUP.com. I spelled it out for you because I've now massacred it enough times today, tripping over my own tongue. This is Courageously You with Martha Davis Alexander. You can reach me at marthadalexander@gmail.com. Yeah, I don't even have to read that. CourageouslyYouCoaching.com or at 805-422-6865. And you guys, we will be right back. So stay with us. You can dance with us during the break. We'll be right back.
Oh, shopping maybe with jewelry.
Yeah, shopping. Yay, and we
Great
are
music.
Back. Yeah, doesn't she have great music? I love that music. I love to just sit there and listen to it and watch the commercial, of course. This is Courageously You with Martha. I am Martha Davis Alexander. I am a recovering attorney and coach and I just came up with a new name. I'll tell you next time. Anyway, we are here with my guest, Mika, and she is an estate planning attorney and an estate litigator in California and has so much knowledge. Actually, she teaches classes on this to students as well as to attorneys. So she is like full of she knows. She's the person in the know on how to protect your legacy and your loved ones with estate planning. So we are back talking about what single people need, right? And why they need it.
Absolutely. You have to take care of yourself. Self-care is so important. And you know this already. And I was saying earlier, it's not fun to think about end of life, right? But you've worked so hard. You are where you are today. You're resilient. You have your loved ones. You have your assets you acquired through hard work. You want to protect what you have. You want to provide for your loved ones in the way that you want and not as dictated by the court system. So
Amen.
you want to get it over with, right? Because it's fun to think about what kinds of treatments do I want to allow, if and when I'm at the hospital and decisions have to be made because I'm not able to. But once you get past the difficult conversation with your estate planning attorney, then you'll feel a sense of relief to have something in place. In the same way as when you prepare, you have some kind of financial plan, right? Your retirement, whatever it is that you have. You also want to think about your estate plan because it's important to have your wishes be laid out as clearly as possible in a legal document. And we talked about the four things, the four very important documents earlier. And these are your will, your advanced healthcare directive, your durable power of attorney, and your revocable trust.
Beautiful. So we have a question from the audience, and that's what about all the digital assets? So we kind of mentioned it, but we didn't go into it, right? So, and it's a great question because actually I have to figure that out for my son now, his digital assets, or he has to figure it out since he's 21. Back
So he
off.
has Roku. Well, he's got a bunch of things, doesn't he? You
He
mentioned
does.
earlier.
He does, right? But there's YouTube channels. There's all this stuff. So how do you do digital assets? What do you have to do to protect your digital assets?
So when you look at the various kinds of digital assets, one of the things you want to make sure you have is ownership, right? Is
Mm,
there clarity in terms of ownership? So in your will, as well as in your trust, you can provide for instructions on what to do with assets that you actually own. But it's important to look before that to make sure that, if you have YouTube channel, do you have the exclusive right to that channel or whatever type of asset it is? Maybe you are a composer, right? You've written some pieces of music, right? And did you consult with an attorney, an intellectual property attorney? Did you make sure that you
for
have
the
the right?
21-year-old, hell no. No, they just put them up there.
Well, it's important to make sure that you're protecting your ownership interests first and foremost before you place those assets in a trust, for example, or make mention of those assets in your will. Your will is a very important instrument, and so is the trust, because you can identify those specific items. In your will, you can have a specific provision, we would call a specific bequest, where you can list the different assets, your personal assets that you own, for example. And the descriptions have to be so specific. If once you've made sure that you have ownership to those assets. and you identify in a in say you recorded. I used to do voiceover, so I'm fairly familiar, with music clips and things like that. But a lot of times you go to a recording studio and you record you record something and you collaborate with other artists, and that final product is not yours, right? Is no longer yours. But if you're able to identify your own intellectual property, other digital assets, they're yours. You can list them on your will, and you can provide instructions on who will receive those assets. If they're not identified anywhere, right, in a will or a trust, and on the date of death, there are assets that belong to you, they're digital assets that were never mentioned. Well, what happens?
Yeah, what does happen? Tell us, Mika. Tell us what happens.
Ends up in the same way as your house, maybe because you're single, the house is under your name only, right? You didn't put it in a trust, right? This house, it shows very clearly on your grant deed that you own it solely, 100% of it is yours. It wasn't in your trust on the date. Maybe you had a trust, you didn't put your digital assets or your house on the date of death. Those assets could potentially be probatable assets, right? They could potentially be probatable assets. But the good news is, Martha, and you know this, you're very familiar with this. What happens if you, after you created a trust, you acquire property or you discover that there were these digital assets that didn't make it in any of your instruments? And you die, and your loved one, your one of your children says, well, what are we going to do with the rest of this? It's clear in the trust, there's identification of assets and what to do with them, specific instructions. But the house didn't make, maybe one of the two houses didn't make it, and then these assets didn't make it. Well, there is still a way to ask the court. Again, you have to involve the court, unfortunately, if you did not properly fund your trust with those assets or the house. Because when you transfer your house into your trust, there has to be a trust transfer deed that's created, signed, and recorded, right? Transferring ownership from yourself as a single person to yourself as the settler, meaning owner, and trustee of your own trust.
Right.
That trust transfer deed, then there is no change in ownership. There's just change in terms of where is, which the title to the
title.
house.
Yeah, title is in the trust, which is why we don't have to put it through probate. So
Exactly.
interestingly enough, what I found is when I refinanced a house, that there was a period of time when the banks would not put it in a trust, or they didn't want to put it in the trust. So then I had to redo that. And some people miss that, right? It's not that people don't take care of putting their assets in the trust. It's that sometimes they get taken out during a refi. It's a mistake, whatever. So it's always good. How often do you think people should, once they have an estate plan, right, check?
Yes.
How often should they revisit, and what's going on, and what should we do?
Yes. So I will answer that question, but you brought up a very important point about refinancing, Martha, right? People have to, usually the banks don't allow you to keep your house in a trust when you're refinancing. And so you take it out, right? And you do the refinancing, and somehow, you forget, somebody doesn't remind you that you have to put the asset back into the trust. And that's where, and then you die, right? And that's where the Hegstad petition comes in, which involves the court, right? You petition the court to allow you to transfer this property that was not transferred back into the trust because of refinancing, right? It is available. This mechanism is available for everybody if upon a showing of intent, and that is that the decedent intended to include that house in a trust, but it was taken out because of refinancing, for refinancing reasons. So your question about how often, So the general answer is it depends, right? But if you there are certain things that will trigger a review, right? Uh, Divorce, right? Arrival of children, change in agents. You know, you don't want the same successor. Um, Anything that require that there's a change in property ownership. You buy more property. Sometimes people acquire more property. They forget to include the additional property in their trust, and a Hegstad would have to be, you know, looked into.
So, Mika, hold on a second. Is Hegstad just California, or is it a federal? Because I
So
don't
I
know.
can, it is under California law, at the state of Hegstad. I cannot provide any, unfortunately, advice on outside of
Well, we're
California.
not giving advice,
Yeah,
but we're
yeah,
just
yeah,
so y'all
exactly.
know, we're
Just a
talking about
conversation. Yeah.
Hegstad, and the petition to put something back in is a California thing. So check
Yes.
with an estate planning or a probate attorney in your area to see what you have there, right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure, just to
Oh,
make sure
absolutely.
that it's where you are as well, or there's something similar to it.
Yeah, and I do represent individuals all over California. So we have used the Hegstad in courts both in Northern and Southern California.
Yeah. So in the last few minutes, right? First, do you have a quick, how do you pick an estate planning attorney? Because only Californians get the privilege of picking you. So what are the things to look for? And then I'm going to ask you last words of advice for today.
So obviously, you have a choice. You want to do your research. In addition to knowing a little bit about the state estate planning attorney's background, and background should not only be focused on where they went to school, it should be on reviews. How many reviews are out there, because the people who have used that person's services will be able to tell you what their experience is like. You would be, I advise you, this is a piece of advice, not a legal advice,
Yep,
in
there
the
you
same
go.
way.
Yeah.
When you're selecting, for services, you want to have a conversation with the estate planning attorney. Pick up the phone, call them, and have a conversation, and ask a couple of questions or more, and see how you if your questions are answered. How do you like this person? Because you know what, it's a relationship. When you seek assistance from an estate planning attorney, you develop a relationship with that person. You don't just have the person draft your estate plan, you sign it, and you're done with it.
Right.
You're going to go to that same person when things happen. You want to find somebody that you can trust. They are more than capable. They have great reviews. They have whatever they have, the awards, recognition for the work that they've done. But more importantly, are you comfortable talking to that person about you? This is about you.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing, because we have especially in Northern California, the estate planning attorneys, we're very close, right? It's a close knit community. We know each other, we refer cases to each other. You want a good fit. I refer out, they refer to me. It's about looking for that person that you can have that professional relationship with. You trust that person, you don't mind going to that person and asking questions, and vice versa.
Yeah.
You don't want to call an attorney and ask a question and that person's like, I can't, look at my website. That's a red flag, because they don't
Right.
even
That's
want to
like
take
a
the
no.
time.
They're not going to
No.
return your calls. That's a no. Don't call them.
Yes.
Okay. Beautiful advice. So we have a few minutes. What what do you want to leave the audience with? I love action steps. So what is it that they can do this week towards making sure they're protecting their loved ones and their legacy?
This week, since we've had a little bit of a conversation about the importance of an estate plan, I encourage you to sit down and make a list of what you want to happen long term, right? Whether it's identifying a person who's going to manage healthcare decisions, financial decisions, or listing assets that you have and identifying beneficiaries. Just make a list. In a perfect world, what would you want to happen when it's time? In the event of death or incapacity, just make a list, get your mind working. And I encourage you to think about that estate plan sooner than later. Commit to it because you're going to have to do it at some point. Commit to it now. You don't have to get started tomorrow, but just the thinking through what things you have, the information you need to have for when you're ready.
Beautiful. So I'm only going to disagree with one thing, and that's you do need to do it tomorrow, right? You do need to think about it. You need to look at it. It is important to do that. So you make one of two choices, right? And yeah, my audience knows I'm big on choice. We all have a choice, whether we show up happy, whether we show up grumpy, whether we show up however we show up, we have a choice in how we do that. So you have one of two choices: do nothing, and you're choosing the estate plan, and a judge who doesn't know you, doesn't know your circumstance, doesn't know anything about your family, whatever infighting, whatever, doesn't know any of that, doesn't have your history, and isn't going to take the time to find out. That's going to make the decision based upon the law in the state you live in, or you're going to choose how you want it to go. And here's the big boogeyman dispelling a myth. Just because you're thinking about it doesn't mean you're going to die. It's like buying life insurance. It's like buying car insurance. Just because you bought car insurance doesn't mean you're going to have an accident, or house insurance, right? Home insurance doesn't mean your house is going to have an issue. It's just due diligence. It's taking care of business, and having a family can be like running a business. So make sure that you take care of this. Please, please, please. Mika and I feel so strongly about this, right? We really want you to take care of stuff. So Mika, give them 5 things they can write down tomorrow, right? 5 things. What are the top
Well,
5
what,
things?
what I said was, interview people. Call me.
Yeah.
See, I would love to help you. Call me. Let's have a conversation. Write down, and I encourage you to talk to more than one estate planning attorney
Yes.
so that you can figure out who you want to work with. Number two, make a list of actually what you said, Martha. When I said it doesn't have to be tomorrow, and Martha said it actually has to be tomorrow. And actually, that's true. You have to give yourself a deadline. You know, by the time, within a month, I should have, decided on an estate planning attorney after interviewing 3 to 5, something like that. Create an action plan, create a list of what you want. Gather, if you have a home, your grant deed, because that's the kind of information,
Oh, don't
piece of
make them do
document
that yet. Don't make them do that yet. Just want a list. Who do you
because
think
of
might want to make decisions for you if you're in the hospital? Who do you trust the
absolutely.
most, right?
Right. Who's going to be your agent for your
Yeah.
durable power of attorney, your agent for your advanced healthcare directive, your will, and your trust? Make a list of your assets because you want to make sure you know
Yeah.
what you have.
Right. That doesn't mean all your personal property, just the important pieces, right? Just the important pieces. Get kind of an idea, right? And you can suss that out as you go. You don't have to do it all at once. Just make a start. Just start. And your estate planning attorney, I promise, will help you. I would love to go more, but we are over time. Mika, thank you so much for coming and
Thank you.
talking to my audience about this. It is one of my top things that I want people to do. Again, Mika is in Walnut Creek, California, but she works all over the state. Her phone number is 925-891-5006. You can reach her at Mika. I'm just going to spell it all for you. Mika at MSDOMINGOLAWGROUP.com. Guys, please, please, please take some action this week and let me know what action you took. This is Martha Davis Alexander with Courageously You with Martha. We'll see you next week right here at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, or you can catch me on the replay. You can reach me at marthadalexander@gmail.com or at courageouslyyoucoaching.com. You guys, sorry I went over. Have a phenomenal, phenomenal weekend, and I can't wait to hear what action step you took.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye, everyone.